told that witches are just the stuff of legends and lore, but is that really true? This video starts out in an already creepy way, witch or not. It starts in a cave. It appears as though two men are searching through this cave. They are speaking to each other and they seem fairly calm, but definitely like something is in the air. I'm not quite sure why they were in the cave in the first place, but their voices are low, they have a flashlight out to cut through the darkness of the cave, and they definitely sound like they are looking for something. After a few seconds, it appears as though the men found maybe not what they were looking for, but they definitely found something. As they walk to a lighter area of the cave where we see some very creepy looking graffiti, we also get a glimpse of a hooded creature that quickly takes off as the men see it. This creature moves in a mysterious way. When slowed down, it looks like the creature basically just jumps up and takes flight, much like a witch would. This footage is just downright weird, and now that you've seen the footage, I ask, what do you think that it was? In our number 9 spot today, we have the flying witch in Mexico. This footage is weird, and I don't have an explanation for it because it really looks like a witch flying on a broomstick. 'Tis the season, I suppose. There isn't much backstory to go off of with this footage, but what I do know is that this incident supposedly took place in Mexico, which honestly wouldn't have been my first guess as to where the witches were hanging out. This footage is pretty grainy and shaky and has a date stamp of 2006, so the footage has definitely been around for a while, and still, it doesn't appear like anyone has debunked it. The footage features what I mentioned earlier. It looks like a witch who is flying away. The witch lands and walks for a bit before taking flight once again. Honestly, this video just might have me convinced. In our number 8 spot today, we have La Llorona. Less of a witch creature and more of a character from mythology, this next terrifying video is unlike anything I have ever seen before. This video is said to be footage of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman. The roots of the Weeping Woman's legend trace back to pre-Columbian times, with some scholars linking her to an Aztec goddess associated with motherhood, fertility, and war. With the arrival of the Spanish and the subsequent blending of cultures, the tale evolved, absorbing elements from European folklore and Catholic morality tales. The most common version of her story tells of a woman named Maria, who, in a fit of rage and despair after being betrayed by her husband, she tragically ends the lives of her own offspring in a river. Overcome by grief, she realizes her horrific act too late, and unable to find them in the afterlife, she is condemned to roam the earth eternally. As a ghostly figure, she wanders near bodies of water, weeping and searching for her lost children while crying out, "Oh, my children." All that being said, this video definitely depicts a terrifying and weeping woman. What do you think?
From YouTuber Guanajuato Paranormal Oficio comes a pretty unsettling piece of footage. Clearly these guys showed up at the wrong brick hut in the middle of an empty field. Well, actually they had come to the right place. They were looking for scary stuff. The site they were setting out to explore is often referred to by locals as the Witch's Room, where tons of urban legends about strange rituals are said to take place. Now, as they got closer to the small building, you can clearly see candlelight illuminating it. But when they get inside, things get much creepier. Yeah, oh my god, it's right, a circle of candles with a voodoo doll in the middle. Get the hell out of there. Well, they didn't. They just kept looking around, and I bet they're glad they did, because then they spot this thing creeping on them. Now, come here, he says. No, don't come here. Stay there. Or move very far away. Either that's a ghoul, or that lady is just really old. What you're looking at here is supposedly a space where Alistair Crowley carried out some of his occultist rituals. A group of explorers called Lost Adventures set out to investigate this old, isolated farmhouse in Cornwall where Alistair Crowley once resided, apparently. The self-proclaimed Great Beast owned Carn Cottage, located between St. Ives and St. Just, and it's thought that he used the place as a hub for some of his occult activities. Now, we can clearly see graffiti on the walls, symbols, and lines on the floor, candles left behind. Clearly people had come here to perform rituals in the years since Crowley was using the place. The urban explorers said they thought satanic rituals were going on here, and maybe that's the case, but not by the signs of what we're seeing here. Clearly this does not look like satanic at all to me, but still a pretty spooky find. In 2016, YouTuber Dateline420 posted a video of something really creepy he came across while hiking through the woods in Suffolk County, New York. He found a whole bunch of missing persons posters, but they were taped up to trees. And not only that, he also came across a huge bundle of tree branches latched together to form what looked like a cage. It was a pretty disturbing sight to come across while walking alone through the woods, and the location also made it kind of freaky because the area was surrounded by hills, so if you did need to run away, you'd have a tough time. He also stated that people could always hide on top of those hills and throw stuff down at you. Being in that ditch area, it's just not a good place to be if you're in trouble. Authorities were contacted and they investigated. Owners of the property nearby said they were setting up for a Halloween party, but are we buying that, or was there something more mysterious and nefarious going on here? What's up with the female passenger in this truck? There's something definitely off about her, right? Now, aside from her kinda ghostly appearance, there's a creepy story behind this clip. The footage was taken inside a truck in Mexico. Late at night on March 31st of 2024, a trucker was making a run to the city of Monterrey. The company's supervisor was checking in on him using a remote camera, and to his shock, he saw what looked like a woman in old-timey clothes, some say more like 80s clothes, sitting right next to the driver. Now, at first, the supervisor was just kind of irritated. See, he thought the driver had picked up a passenger, which was against company policy, understandably. So the supervisor messaged the driver about it, being like, "What's up with this woman in your truck?" And the driver just looked at his phone and brushed it off. He thought his supervisor was just messing with him, so he continued along with his drive. When he got to his destination, though, the supervisor showed him the dashcam footage, and the driver could not believe what he was seeing. He was adamant that no one was with him during the trip, but there was this woman sitting next to him the entire time. Classic urban legend kind of story. I love ghost stories about people picking up ghost passengers along the road. Always get under my skin. This next one is like something out of Children of the Corn. Take a look. Definitely looks like two cloaked figures performing some sort of ritual. Not the type of thing I'd like to see in the middle of the night alone. The uploader said, "I heard mysterious sounds surrounding the Alps near my village. I am a migrant worker. I followed the sound and came across strange tall figures standing 3.5 meters high. They were moving, what looked like either wings, maybe they were angels. They seemed to be conducting a ritual around a lightning rod. Those rods harbor a lot of energy. Maybe they were gaining energy from that rod. I was scared, but on the other hand, I didn't feel threatened. Still, to see those huge figures in the darkness through misty rain with only my phone's light was amazing. This is something that has completely changed my life and view on life, and now I understand that we really are not the only intelligent beings on this planet." The only thing scarier than a regular sized witch is, an extra tall witch. Take a look at this thing. Yeah, I don't like that. Someone captured this nightmare fuel on the security camera outside their home. Something was crouching and peering at their house from the bushes. A spindly creature with pale skin and glowing eyes. A lot of people say this thing looks like the Slender Man or a rake. The rake creature, not like the tool, obviously. And when it stands up, you really see how tall it is, and I can definitely see the resemblance. But I also do get a kind of witchy vibe here. It almost looks like it might be wearing a black cloak that covers most of its torso. But the featureless face, bald head, and the glowing eyes, it does definitely give off more of a Slender Man feel. Whatever, if I saw that on my home security camera, I'd be packing up my bags right away. I'd sell my home for, $100 if I needed to, and I'd just be on the road. In September 1710, an old widow in Island McGee, Ireland, began experiencing bizarre, seemingly supernatural events. She'd claim stones would be thrown at her windows, only no one would be outside. Objects would vanish and reappear, and she'd find her bedsheets rearranged into the shape of a corpse. Then she claimed to see a demonic creature that ominously told her that she would die soon. Well, just a few months later, on February 21st of 1711, she died after being hit with intense stabbing pains in her back. The locals immediately suspected witchcraft, especially after a young girl named Mary Dunbar found an apron with the widow's bonnet, and soon after, strange happenings began to plague her as well. Mary started vomiting small objects, pins, buttons, and was said to have levitated above her bed. After weeks of torment, she named 8 local women as the culprits, claiming their spirit images had been visiting her. The town's clergy, led by Edward Clements, took these accusations very seriously and brought these women to court. There was no evidence, mind you, they were just going off of Mary's claims, but the women were sentenced to a year in prison, and during the trial they were attacked by an angry mob. One of the accused ended up losing an eye. Luckily, they weren't burnt at the stake, but the fact that all someone needed to do was make a statement with absolutely no evidence whatsoever, and 3 women landed themselves in jail for a year, is incredibly disturbing. Not as disturbing as these following cases, though. The 1612 Northampton witch trials started like so many others. Noble folk accusing common folk, mostly women, of witchcraft. The main accuser was Elizabeth Belcher, who didn't like a young woman named Joanne Brown. Elizabeth started claiming that Joanne had cursed her, and when Elizabeth fell ill, she was sure that this curse had to be real. Her brother William Avery even jumped on the bandwagon, saying he tried to visit Joanne's cottage to lift the curse, but was stopped by some strange invisible barrier. Joanne, her mother Agnes, and 4 others were arrested and sentenced to hang. The odds were stacked against them, as innocent until proven guilty wasn't exactly a thing at the time, especially when it came to accusations of witchcraft. Once you were accused, everyone just assumed you were guilty. Now, the story goes that before the hanging, William Avery was even allowed to enter the woman's cells and physically attack Agnes Brown because it was believed that spilling a witch's blood could lift her curses. The Scottish witch hunt of 1661 to 1662 was one of the deadliest witch hunts in history. It began in small areas around Edinburgh, where over 200 people were accused of witchcraft in just 9 months. This quickly spread across Scotland, and by the end of 1662, at least 660 people had been accused, and some reports say as many as 450 were executed, but that number may have been embellished over the years. Still though, a lot of people died. Some historians blame the witch hunt on the end of English rule in Scotland. Before 1660, English judges were more hesitant to prosecute suspected witches, but supposedly once they left, the Scottish authorities cracked down on supposed witchcraft harder. Not sure how I feel about that explanation. I feel like that might be some revisionist history, but church officials also did see the witch trial supposedly as a way to regain influence now that the English were gone, again, supposedly. Eventually this died off, though. The witch trial stopped, mostly because non-religious authorities just got tired of the witch panic and finally put their foot down. Next on the list is Mother Redcap. There is a famous pub in London. There is a famous pub in the London borough of Camden called Mother Redcap. As to how the place got its name, there's a dark legend behind it. Originally, the pub was a cottage built by a man named Jacob Bingham. His wife was thought to have been a witch, and thus his daughter Jenny Bingham, born at some point between 1603 and 1625, was also thought to be one. Jenny would go on to have a number of different men in her life, all of which died prematurely of various causes, but this made people even more suspicious of her. And then her parents were accused of witchcraft and hanged. Now she was a complete outcast. She was almost entirely reclusive, aside from a man who came to live with her, seeking shelter from a gang of dangerous men who were after him. This guy too ended up dying under mysterious circumstances. It's said she was eventually hanged, but another legend goes that the devil himself showed up at her cottage and she was found dead by her fireplace the following day. At our number 5 spot, we have the Bell Witch. In the early 19th century in Adams, Tennessee, the Bell family, primarily John Bell, claimed to encounter a malevolent entity that became known as the Bell Witch. Strange and unexplained events began to plague the Bell family home. Starting in 1817, they reported hearing knocking sounds on their doors and walls, unseen hands pulling their bed sheets, and weird noises like chains being dragged across the floor. Soon things got physical though, with family members being slapped, pinched, and scratched by some invisible force. The entity also reportedly communicated with the family, seeming to have intimate knowledge about their lives. It identified itself as the Bell Witch and claimed to be a spirit with a grudge against John Bell. There were also a number of accounts made by witnesses corroborating the Bell family's claims. Next up, we have Moll Dyer. Moll Dyer lived in Leonardtown, Maryland, going down in history as one of the most prominent women accused of witchcraft during the Maryland witch trials in the late 1690s. At the time, there had been a deadly plague going around town, and added to that, the crops were in bad condition during a particularly harsh winter. It was just a bad time, and not having anything tangible to blame, the locals took their frustration out on those who they deemed witches. Superstition took over completely. Moll Dyer was one of the many who were accused of witchcraft. She was a surprise, reclusive, living alone at the edge of town, and after a town meeting, the locals determined that Dyer had called upon the devil to plague Leonardtown. An angry mob gathered and Dyer's home was burnt to the ground. She managed to escape though, being chased out of town, but she wouldn't survive long in the harsh cold, eventually collapsing onto a rock. She placed her right hand on the rock, lifting her left into the sky, cursing the town for all of eternity. She was found days later, frozen to death, her arm still raised above her head.
In our number 3 spot, we have Alice Kyteler. Alice Kyteler was one of the first witches known in Ireland. She apparently was married 4 times and outlived all of her husbands. Yep, of course that was unusual for this period, which was the 13th century. All of her husbands died mysteriously, and after every one, people grew more and more suspicious of her, naturally. Until her final husband died, then his kids accused her of poisoning him. Eventually, rumors began to spread that she had killed her husbands as offerings to the devil himself. She also wasn't very well liked in the town, so that didn't help her case either. But apparently she had been worshipping him for decades. People began pushing for her to be captured and to have a formal trial, but before they were able to, she fled the country, thus proving that she probably did kill her husbands. She might not have been a witch, but it's definitely possible she was. In our number 2 spot, we have Malin Matsdotter. Malin and her husband were either evil or they were being possessed, because their story really gives me the creeps. In 1676, Malin's husband was sentenced to death for being inappropriate with an animal. Makes me sick. And Malin was accused of being a witch by her own daughter. Her daughter said that she would worship the devil. Apparently, many young ones went missing in her town, and people believed that she snatched them and sacrificed them. At her trial, she was accused of taking them, and since her daughter was among the accusers, she had no chance. She was sentenced to death. She died without a sound, which confirmed to many that she was a real witch because they apparently don't feel pain. Guys, maybe she was a real witch. If I get too close to the oven and feel the heat, I react. So if I was her, I would have made my exit the most dramatic show anyone would ever see. So dramatic people would laugh and wish they hadn't burned me. In In our number 1 spot, we of course have Alistair Crowley. Not all witches are women, folks. Probably the worst witch that I have ever read about was a male, and he was the darkest they come. People called him the wickedest man to have ever existed. Scarier than a demon. In fact, he was probably Satan himself. Of course, I'm speaking of Alistair Crowley, who was alive not too long ago. Close to 100 years ago, he was being kicked out of Italy for his occult gatherings, where it is believed that he channeled Satan and everyone danced naked under the moon. Such fun. He would refer to himself as the Beast or the Antichrist. He traveled around the world promoting his religion called Thelma and promoted his teachings. He wrote many books, including the Book of Thoth, the Book of Lies, and the Book of the Law. The scary thing about Alistair is that people still follow his teachings today.